the reason we're talking about SIDS is because SIDS and suffocation during sleep, it's the number one cause of death for infants under 1.
Yeah.
So when they look at SIDS, 90 to 95% of SIDS cases, they found at least one modifiable risk factor, which to me, I read that it's both tragic, but it's also kind of empowering for parents. It's like, okay, that means that there are things that we can do.
Goal here is to prevent as many preventable deaths as we can, right? I mean, that's the goal. And we understand that there's rare cases that even if you do all the best things that, accidents happen and all that with drownings, with car accidents, with safe sleep, all that stuff. But we want to give that information and hope parents make the choices that make sense, but that follows the evidence and follows what is, we were discussing here.
One of the number one things you can do for SIDS is safe sleep.
Yeah.
So that brings us to that. So kind of the overarching thing that I tell people, it's easy. I tell parents, I tell grandparents, it's the ABCs of sleep. Baby needs to sleep alone, on their back, and in their crib.
Welcome to PedsDocTalk TV and this episode of the PedsDocTalk Podcast, where you can catch my amazing conversations with guests on the show here on my YouTube channel, or if you prefer audio only, wherever you access podcasts. I'm Dr. Mona Amin, a board-certified pediatrician, lactation consultant, and mom of 2, and I'm here to uplift, support, and guide you so you can raise those incredible kids. Let's get to today's amazing conversation. Welcome back to the show. I am Dr. Mona, and I am excited about today's guest. She is Dr. Darria Long, a Harvard and Yale-trained emergency physician, national best-selling author of Mom Hacks, TED speaker of the widely popular An ER Doctor on Ending the Crazy Busy, which is one of my favorite TED Talks, by the way, and a regular on national TV, including CNN, NBC, and Netflix. She's a go-to on social media at Dr. Darria on Instagram for kids and family emergencies and illness. And her mission is to help you prevent life's little and big accidents and illnesses and to know what to do when they happen, keeping your family safe and healthy and giving you peace of mind, which is something that I love to do as well. And she's the founder of No Panic Parenting, the first baby proofing and baby safety course founded by an ER doctor and assistant professor at the University of Tennessee School of Medicine. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Darria.
Hey, Mona, Dr. Mona. So good to see you. Thank you so much.
I think we're okay on a first name basis. I will still call you Dr. Darria in my intro because that is who you are. But Darria, I'm so excited. By the way, going back to that TED Talk, I had to prepare for a TED Talk style conversation at the Pinnacle Conference in May.
An amazing conference.
Yes, and your TED Talk was the example that they gave me. And so they were like, take a look at this one. And I was like, okay. And I watched it and I was like, I loved it. And I did all my research and the conversation and presentation went amazing. So I love it. Sure. You're an inspiration to me from a speaking standpoint. And I know it's a mutual love, but really, I'm so excited to have you here. And, I'm really excited to talk to you today about SIDS. And of course, this is a very serious conversation. I know we're starting this with a very lighthearted love fest for each other, but we're going to get into a lot about SIDS, some misconceptions, some statistics, just general things that I think will be so useful. But before we get into that conversation, tell everyone a little bit more about yourself and what made you create No Panic Parenting.
Yes. Thank you, Mona. I am so excited to be chatting here with you. So I have 3 kiddos and I had my third last July, and he was a lot younger than my first 2. He is not, my older 2 were 9, 6, and then we had a baby come along. And there was something that clicked with that third child. One, I was now, you could say older. I'd like to say veteran mother. And I wasn't so afraid that I was just going to break this baby anymore. And I wanted to enjoy the time more. I also had 10 more years of treating patients in the ER, taking care of little kids, taking care of accidents, looking those parents in the face sometimes when they were, feeling so guilty or grieving and thinking, oh, man, if I could have just talked to you 2 hours ago, we maybe could have prevented this. And so all of that clicked into place with baby number 3. I had to go baby proof my own home. And I thought, we need to be telling parents different information because the information we're getting on baby proofing that's out there is not actually what I'm telling my patients and not what I think is the most important thing. And so that's where it came from. That's where No Panic Parenting came from. The idea being that you get the information you need and then it brings you peace of mind, that it doesn't scare you more, that you can have that Whew, okay, breath of fresh air. Now I can take care of my baby. They're safe and I can enjoy this time too.
Well, I think this is wonderful because I think what I'm seeing online, having been online for about 5, 6 years now, but also more so online than in my office, is that there's two feelings when it comes to safety. One is there's some safety shaming in that parents who make mistakes or parents who don't know all the information get shamed. Like, and a lot of for me is education, right? How is a parent supposed to know what to do unless they're taught, right? And then the other thing that I see is that parents sometimes get too deep into the safety issues, meaning they're so obsessive that they can't find that healthy balance. Like it's
Hmm.
almost like when people talk so much about, like, don't eat this and don't do this. So it's almost like, how do we create this safety balance, understanding what the biggest risks are, not panicking, like you're saying, like not going into this rabbit hole of everything I'm going to do, my child's going to get injured or die or anything like that, but really make it easy to digest, which I think is what your platform's all about, and no panic parenting is all about.
That's exactly it. It's like, let's give you the information, not in a way that it makes you more nervous, but
Yes.
that it makes you feel more calm. Because I don't want you relying. I'd much rather somebody be aware, and that's what we talk. You liked my TED talk. I talked about triaging your life there.
Yes.
Well, now I talk about triaging baby proofing. So, like, let's look at the risks so that you can. If you protect against the 99% of the things or whatever, then you don't have to think about them. Then you're not relying on luck or anything like that. You are actually, that your child's protected, and then they can be freer, they can go play, they can go explore, and you can be more relaxed about it.
And, of course, there are so many things to talk about when it comes to safety, and we're only talking about SIDS because I don't have enough hours in the day to talk to you about all the different safety things. And I'm sure we'll have, you'll come on again and we'll talk about other safety issues
Happy
that
to.
that you see in the ER, especially. But let's talk about SIDS. And SIDS is a big thing. Obviously, I've seen it, you've seen it, more than we would want to. But maybe people listening may not know what it is. So can you explain what SIDS is, what it stands for, and how it differs from other causes of infant mortality, or maybe some misconceptions that you hear about the definition of SIDS?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Mona. And in part because it has changed even since you and I were
Yeah.
in training, which was cough, cough, not that long ago. But so, and when I talk about it, we kind of group all kind of potentially preventable deaths. That's kind of like your umbrella. But when you say we're talking about, infants under 1 year old is really when
Mhm.
you're thinking about SIDS. Really, under 4 months is the greatest risk. So, under that umbrella of potentially preventable deaths, there are kind of outright accidents, car accident, fire, fall, or something like that. Then there is explained SUID, sudden
Mhm.
unexpected infant death. Sometimes called SUDI. Those are ones that you initially didn't know why we lost a child, but then they looked into, investigated, and they found this baby had a congenital heart
Mm.
malformation. There was a pillow in the crib. They suffocated against the crib.
Ah.
We figured it out. The third thing, after you have excluded those two, is SIDS, meaning you lost the baby and we don't know why. Now, 90 to 95% of those have, and we'll talk about this later, some potentially preventable risk factors. You can say, well, these four things happened, these probably contributed, but we can't point to the one that is SIDS.
This is so helpful because you just differentiated something that I think parents may get confused on, because the pillow, like, so unsafe sleep practices like having a pillow or falling asleep on, like, just say I've had situations where babies have passed away from sleep, like falling asleep on their caregiver's chest on the couch. So would that
Mm-hmm.
be considered SUID because there was a reason for it, or would that be considered SIDS, using that as an example?
Yeah, and that's part of what's so hard because it really
Yes.
depends on who's a medical examiner and how they do it. There is a
Ah,
push to classify less as SIDS and more as SUID if you can
nice.
find
Yeah.
the reason. But that sometimes comes down to judgment. If they can say comfortably for sure
Ah,
this
yes.
was the thing versus we're not sure. That's why those two are kind of fluid, and that's why, like, even when I talk about it on social, I combine all potentially preventable deaths because essentially the things that prevent SUID are things that probably would have reduced the risk of SIDS too.
That is so helpful. And
So,
again, I love these definitions, and because even for me, I was just like, "Oh, yes, that is a great question for me to ask you," because I'm learning
mhm,
more about the definitions, and I'm sure, like you said, it's always changing, so it's really
mhm.
important for us to stay up to date and have experts in the field that know more about this stuff and can educate. And I know we'll get into so much more, but what are the current statistics around SIDS, and has it increased in recent years, and do we have accurate data? Is it hard to get the data? Do we have international data, or is it just the United States, or how is that all taken and reported?
Yeah, and it's tough. It's always
Yeah.
tough to get that kind of data, and especially if you look over 20 years because the definitions and terms have changed.
Yeah.
But we can get overall trends. So, like 1992 was when the AAP first started saying, that maybe babies should sleep on their backs or their sides back then. Then 94 was the Back to Sleep campaign.
Hmm.
Before that, babies slept on their stomach, which is why, our parents and, your listeners' parents probably say, well, you didn't sleep on your back.
Yeah.
And we can talk about how to handle that in a second, too. But so that was the Back to Sleep campaign. And as a result, there was a massive drop in SIDS from the mid 1990s to the mid 2000s. Massive, huge. Then, as a result, they saw some SUID rising, but that was just probably definitions. Since then, since about mid 2000s, SIDS rates have essentially been about the same. And then in some cases in the last couple of years seem to be increasing again. But essentially the really biggest drop was Back to Sleep, and we haven't been able to lower it significantly since then.
Interesting. And
Mhm.
there's no reason or understanding as to why? Like it's kind of plateaued.
Um, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And again, it's, the risk factors that we know contribute to SIDS, and we can talk about that in
Yeah.
a minute. Really, they seem to still be being done. And, it's hard
Yeah.
for a parent. Parents are trying to be very good, and there's so many parents who are they're well intentioned. But they see some marketing for a baby crib bumper. Those are still
Yes.
marketed. You can, if you search on, third party vendors, a lot of the time it's really unsafe stuff that is being sold, and in the sponsored top rows, it's hard for parents to know, which is why why you do the work that you do, why I do the work that I do too, why we're talking about this.
Yeah, and let's get into that, the risk factors for SIDS. And
Okay.
are there certain groups of babies? Because I know you had already alluded to the fact that under 4 months, obviously under a year, but also definitely under 4 months. But let's go over age group, but also any known risk factors as of now that we know for SIDS.
Yeah, so since they say there's a triple risk model that
Mhm.
you probably know about, Mona, your listeners, some of them may know about that. There's kind of three factors. It's like the Swiss cheese model. The
Yeah.
first is a baby who intrinsically has some vulnerability to SIDS. Maybe for some reason their arousal mechanism that wakes them up, that startles them, is just less developed, or maybe they have some problem with their heart, lungs, or nervous system. Two, at the same time, you have an external factor. So that baby who's already vulnerable is put in an external situation. Maybe there is, a pillow in their crib. Maybe there's bed sharing with somebody. Maybe they're, in any number of things, there's some external factor. And that both of those two things happen at a critical development period for a baby. So when those three things line up is when you can get a baby where SIDS can happen. And so that's why when we look at that, the good thing is that there's actually some interesting research happening on, the babies that are vulnerable, that intrinsic vulnerability, because it used to
Yeah.
be like, well, we couldn't do anything about that. There's some interesting research happening there. We'll see. But then for parents, that means like, okay, so let's, as parents, look at that external environment, because that is directly where parents can modify things.
And can
So
control, right? Because you
yeah,
you bring up the fact that if there is an intrinsic thing, I'm sure parents like, well, how do I know my baby has one of those intrinsic things? And to be clear, one of the biggest things we do, obviously, we do checkups just to make sure like baby's growing. We check heart, lungs, basics, but there's no at this point. As it stands, there's no test to find out which of those babies have more of the intrinsic risk factor. Correct?
hmm yes,
Yeah,
that's exactly
yeah.
true. Not
But
yet.
so we're yes,
So the
so we're
power
trying
for
to
parents is in the external.
Awesome. So yeah, we're trying to modify and just do control the controllables like we talk about with so much of safety. So
Yes.
helpful. And is there any certain environmental factors in the home that can increase the risk of
Yes.
SIDS?
100%. So when they
Yeah.
look at SIDS, 90 to 95% of SIDS cases, they found at least one modifiable risk factor, which to me, I read that it's both tragic, but it's also kind of empowering for parents. It's like, okay, that means that there are things that we can do. One of the biggest things is safe sleep, and making sure that your baby is in a safe sleep environment. Another one is exposures. So exposures to nicotine, alcohol, marijuana, opioids, illicit drugs. There's a lot more, marijuana, THC, CBD use, and all of those things can potentially increase your risk. not getting routine immunizations is actually associated with an increased risk of SIDS.
Oh, but
Um,
Dr. Daria, everyone says it's the opposite on social media.
I was just
All the
about to mention that.
anti-vaxxers. I
No,
thank
thank
you
you,
for saying that.
Oprah. You like,
Because
yeah,
the
really.
amount of anti-vaxxers, like literally, I mean, people need to hear this. Like a child will die. Like I'm being honest, like maybe an influencer's child or someone posts that their child has died. And all of a sudden the anti-vaxxers like to use that child as the poster child for why not to vaccinate. Oh, well, 2 weeks ago they got the DTaP vaccine, or 2 weeks ago they got this. And then what happened? So let's be clear here. Vaccines do not cause SIDS. They actually can be protective. So I agree with that, obviously, but it is very true. And do not believe all the things you see on social that are misinformed and are not correct.
And I think it's so frustrating. I'm glad I was literally about to enforce that to make sure that people heard that not getting vaccines is what increases the risk of SIDS. And it's frustrating because for parents, again, they're trying to do the right thing.
Yes.
And as a parent, you get nervous about everything. And then you see in your feed somebody saying that these vaccines caused XYZ. And it is impossible as a parent to not get a little nervous about that. I
And
remember my kids were getting their vaccine, and in the back of my head, I was like, "Oh, I was remembering these things that you've heard from
yes.
people in redacted who have been lost their license, and it isn't. And I knew that these vaccines are protective, but that was just my mommy gut, mommy heart, just
Yes.
being like, "Oh, I hate that I even have to worry about this, but it's there
Well, I
because we
I
worry
love
about
that you
everything."
just I love that you just brought that up because you are a physician, and same thing happened to me. And I like to be clear about this because my son, I have obviously a son and a younger daughter. My son had a stroke and seizures at birth. Okay. And when it came time to his 2-month vaccines, my neurologist was like, hey, look, it's up to you if you want to get the vaccines. And why are we having this conversation as two physicians, me and a pediatric neurologist? And the risk was there is a low risk of the DTaP vaccine, as we know, causing febrile seizures if it's given with conjunction with other vaccines. This is not hidden information. This is on all the labels and all the things, but it's low. The risk is so low. But she left it up to me and we discussed it. And I gave my son the vaccines on schedule. But my mommy heart that night was awake the whole night. I just was awake, even though I knew. And so I love that you're sharing this because going on that tangent about vaccines and SIDS and all of that, it is not abnormal for you to want the best for your child and want to think, well, could it happen? But we know that these risks are, the risk of a febrile seizure is low. And we know that there's no association between SIDS and vaccines as it stands. And if it were, we wouldn't be recommending them, right? I mean, this is obviously, we want the best for our children.
Exactly.
And
My
so,
baby
but
just got his vaccines for the
yeah,
year. Yes.
I love that you brought that up. Thank you. I feel like that's important conversations for people to hear, especially from two physician mothers who do want the best for our kids and also the best for our patients. And thank you for that
Yes.
segue on SIDS and
Yes.
vaccines.
And
I love
to
that.
close this loop, I know you have a really smart audience. If
I
anybody
do.
wants to read something about this, Dr. Paul Offit, I'm sure you know
Yep.
him.
Yep.
He's a pediatric immunologist, infectious disease. He sits on the boards looking at vaccines. He's just absolutely brilliant. Personal friend too. He's the one when there was a measles outbreak, I'm emailing like, do I need to do something about this early for my baby? Has a new book out called Tell Me When It's Over. It's about the
Oh,
pandemic.
good.
It's about vaccines. And so now when somebody asks me, I was like, go read Paul Offit's book. He is 30,000 times smarter than I am. And he has researched this and is a wonderful book. So
Well,
anybody looking at it,
I need to read
really
that
like
and I'm going to link it. Thank you. I love it. I love getting this evidence-based, people who get it. Like it's
mm-hmm.
really important to spread the right information, especially when we're
Yes.
talking about something as serious as SIDS. We don't want to spread that misinformation. And like we said, if we knew that there was an issue, nobody in their right mind, pediatricians included and ER docs, would want that for our families and for our children. So, and our patients. So really, it's really important to remember to get the information from the right places. Okay. Back to SIDS because
Okay.
I want to go get through
Okay.
that about
A few other things to reduce the
environmental.
risk.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, if you can, feeding your baby with breast milk has some protective thing. Okay. If there are mothers out there who cannot feed their baby with breast milk, it is okay. But if you can, it might be protective. I know. Two of my kids, yes, third one I couldn't. So that's
Yes.
okay. Using a pacifier in the first 6 months, there's some protective effect for that. And then lastly is avoid overheating baby by making it too warm in the room or putting too many clothes on them. So
And is the
those are all risk
pacifier more
factors.
so probably because it just has that sucking, like just to kind of keep them in like like, is there a reason we know why the pacifier would be helpful
It's the
or yeah?
sucking, the kind of airway, and again, it's
Yes,
not like if they use it, it is. If they don't, it's going to cause it. But
correct.
it's something that they have found. Just use it without a leash. Obviously, you don't want anything
Yeah.
leash wise or string in that crib.
Yeah, and like we said, I had a baby who was formula fed, who was one baby who was breastfed, and then I had a baby who took a pacifier and a baby who didn't take a pacifier. So
Exactly.
I never really worried so much about the lack of pacifier use or the lack of breastfeeding. But again, we're trying to create these most optimal situations and looking at what we know as of now. Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. And of course, a lot of the SIDS discussions that we have surround safe sleep. So, what are the current guidelines
Yes.
for safe sleep to reduce the risk of SIDS?
Yes. And one thing I also want to mention, and we were talking about stats earlier, I didn't mention this. So just to kind of go back to the intro, the reason we're talking about SIDS is because SIDS and suffocation during sleep, it's the number one cause of death for infants under one. And
Hmm.
it's so it's just really, really important that we be talking about this. And both, again, kind of grouping them together, SIDS and suffocation during sleep, which is why one of the
Yeah.
number one things you can do for SIDS is safe sleep. That brings us to that. So kind of the overarching thing that I tell people, it's easy. I tell parents, I tell grandparents, it's the ABCs of sleep. Baby needs to sleep alone, on their back, and in their crib. So by alone, I mean nothing is in that crib. And of course, that also includes in an approved bassinet for the first 2 to 3
Yeah.
months, if you'd rather that. And my bassinet, not a co-sleeper bed sharing device, but a true JPMA certified bassinet. So alone, no blankets, no pillows, no nothing, but it's your baby. It's a sleep sack and it's an optional pacifier. There's nothing else. There's no bumpers, no mesh bumpers, no nothing. Ouch! I hit my. See, I'm getting so excited, Mona. I'm hitting my funny bone on my desk. I just can't
Oh,
take it right
you're
now.
feeling it. I know. I know. I love it. I
I'm
love
just
that I have this. I love that the podcasts are not on video. So if you want to, go from audio to video and watch Dr. Daria hit her elbow, being so excited, watch this on
this
YouTube. Passionate.
podcast with
You're
sound
passionate.
effects brought to
You're
you by
passionate.
Dr.
Yeah.
Daria.
Yeah.
Yes. And so, and again, on their back, we talked about back to sleep, and also in their crib or bassinet. No other places.
So going back to what you had mentioned earlier about the back to sleep campaign in the 90s and that reduction, and then we talk about our parents saying, well, we all slept with 10 blankets and you were on your belly because babies sleep better on their belly, all of that stuff. What would you say for those families who are being told that from their parents who said, well, everyone survived?
Yeah, well, everyone survived. So that is the title there is survivor bias or
Yes.
survivorship bias. And it includes essentially taking the anecdotes around your world where people ended up okay and assuming that that is universal. So
Yeah.
I use this for car seats. People say, well, we didn't
Yeah.
put you all
Yeah.
in car seats. You rode in buckets in the back of the truck and you were all okay. The answer is that, yes, I was okay. Yes, my siblings were okay. But actually, in the 1980s, because of before they had car seats, actually several thousand children died
Yeah.
just because of cars not using car seats. So just because we were okay does not mean that that actually was what happened on the population standpoint. So that's actually not true. That is your lens. It's actually not true. Everybody was not okay. And secondly, the beauty of population health is that something bad didn't have to die. It happened. I didn't have to die in a car accident for me to know that actually it's a really good thing to put my child in a car seat. So that's the
Yeah.
beauty of population health. We use the data from an entire population, a generation of infants, so that we can do better for this new generation. So one is no, it wasn't okay for everybody. Two, here's the data. Three is remember somebody who's telling you that they might be feeling guilty. They might be feeling judged. That happens a
Yeah.
lot. So I also try to come at this not with like, you're a jerk. Here's some data slapped in your
Yeah.
face,
Yeah.
but to say, not everybody was okay. You did the best with the information you had. We didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Now we do. And we're going to take that and make it a better, safer world for our babies. So this is why we're doing this.
No, I love that you brought that up. Obviously, I was expecting you to bring up the survivorship bias and how that applies to so many things related to safety. And again, going back to how we started the conversation, the goal here is to prevent as many preventable deaths as we can, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the goal. And we understand that there's rare cases that even if you do all the best things that, accidents happen and all that with drownings, with car accidents, with safe sleep, all that stuff, but we want to give that information and hope parents make the choices that make sense, but that follows the evidence and follows what is, we were discussing here. And that kind of brings me to something that I wanted to talk about, which, I had this pediatrician from India, and obviously India has a billion people. I'm not exaggerating, but billion people and hundreds of millions of children. And co-sleeping is very common in India. And a lot of my listeners may be tuning in, and most of my listeners are evidence-based and understand safe sleep, but there are some listeners that may be like, look, it's culturally what we do, and it's just something that has been done for generations. And I guess my question to you is, how can we be compassionate to cultural practices, but also discuss safety concerns? And is there an in-between in your eyes? And it's okay if there's not, but when I talked to that pediatrician, I asked him about the safety, and I said, what do you tell your parents? And he said, Mona, in our culture, there's no other option. Like, you think about income, you think about this, like we do the best we can. We talk about not putting pillows in the bed. We talk about all these things, but we also have to understand that some of our families are multiple children. So I guess, what is your thought on that, and understanding the cultural differences that may exist and how we can save more lives this way, knowing the risks that
Yeah.
we know and you have seen in
That
ERs and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I think about it in bed sharing, it's
Yeah.
if you look at what the AAP is calling the term now, it's bed sharing. I feel like there's three categories that parents fall into. There are those who say this is our culture, is to bed share. We share the bed with them, so we choose to do it.
Mm-hmm.
There are those who say, I'm never going to bed share. And then at
Mm-hmm.
3 a.m, baby's not sleeping and they are so exhausted, they don't know what to do. And so they bring baby into their bed. Those people feel guilty about bed sharing and
Yeah.
know that they shouldn't. And they're like, I don't know what to do. And then there's those who don't bed share. And, each of those kind of deserves to be broken out and get some slightly different communications because they have different issues.
Yeah.
What I do tell everybody is I do want them to have the statistics. The AAP has some really good stats on this, and they say bed sharing, just bed sharing in general across the board, increases an infant's risk of SIDS by 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
So you take the baseline SIDS, you're sharing a bed with that infant, it's 3 times higher. And then I just like to give them a little more information, because what are even higher risk factors? Because if I can tell you the risk factors, then you can make judgments. So,
Yeah.
just to increase it by, 5 times more to 5 times 3. So now you're essentially 15 times more bed sharing with a preterm or low birth weight infant.
Yes.
Bed sharing on soft surfaces, bed sharing, which includes your crib or, DACA tots and, things we don't like
Yeah.
to mention those, but yes. Again, bed sharing with an infant under 4 months old. And it's interesting, bed sharing with anybody who is not the parent. So another relative or a child. And then, interestingly, just to round it all out, the AAP says that the factors that are 3 times 10, so now you have 30 times risk higher
Yeah.
SIDS, is bed sharing with anybody who is impaired. But they define that as anybody who is impaired by alcohol, sedating medications, drugs, or fatigue. I was like, well, that's
Yeah.
helpful.
That's everybody.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That Venn
Yeah.
diagram just became
Yeah.
an entire circle. So what I say, cultures when they bed share, it's like, well, if you want to bed share, there's not a safe way to do it. There are ways to lower the risk.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
I don't want to just tell parents, no, don't bed share, go away, because then they
Right.
might
Thank
plan to
you.
bed share anyways, and then they're going to do it unsafer, whatever the word is for that. So it's like, okay, the things that make it worse: preterm infant, baby under 4 months, anything soft. So if you want to bed share, you should be sleeping on a flat, very, very thin mattress on the floor. You need to be wearing your own sleep sack like the baby is, so there aren't really any pillows or sheets there. And it is just really, it's the mom, really the dad. If you look at risk factors, it's actually the mother is less a risk factor as the dad. Again, the data is not perfect here, but just, not some other relative, and not in a place baby can fall and be wedged. If you don't wish to do those things, then let's find a different way, something other than bed sharing, because those are the only ways to slightly lower the risk.
I'm giving a slow clap if you can't hear it. Let me tell you something. I really appreciate that answer. And that is kind of where I'm coming from when it comes to safety. And you said it perfectly. Like, if we as pediatricians tell parents, you're ridiculous, you're stupid, you shouldn't bed share, you're a bad parent, then they're going to do it anyways. And they're never going to be told, here are the risk factors, in a compassionate, educated way. And this is how I approach things. And Dr. Daria, that's why I really like your platform, because this is exactly what I look out for in fellow pediatricians. And I'm going to be honest with you, that doesn't always exist in social media education. It is a lot of shaming. There is a lot of extremes on both sides, right? I mean, we see
Mhm.
clinicians who say bed sharing is bad, 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 da 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 da. And then we also see people who are not pediatricians that are like, there's no risk. It's what God intended. It's what biology intended. I'm like, yo, guys, this is both wrong. We're both wrong
Yeah.
here in that we need to know what is it that the family needs? What are the issues that they have? Do they know how to reduce the risk? And do they understand that even with that risk reduction of bed sharing, it's higher than not bed sharing? And as long as they
Hmm.
know that, which is what we just talked about, they can make the choice that makes sense for their families, but they need to know
Hmm.
the risk. And that is what gets me so passionate, and why I'm happy that you came on, is that both of those extremes make me lose hair and go
Hmm.
gray. But the one, when we say that there's no risk, like when I find videos that are like, oh, it's biology for your child to be close. And I'm like, guys, it's biology for a lot of things, but kids can die. And back
Right.
in the day when we were in like caveman era, you're probably sleeping on a floor, like on a rocky bed. You
Right.
weren't on
Yes.
pillows and all that. So it's not biology. Things have changed. There's soft, cushiony pillows. There's dad who snores heavily and rolls over on their
Hmm.
baby
Those are
and is
baby.
not afraid of the
Hmm.
wolves. So there's going to be
Right.
a risk.
Right. Exactly. That is
So
amen to
it's
that. I mean,
different.
evolutionarily, 80% of children or some large one didn't make it out of, adolescence. So
Yes.
let's not, I don't actually want to go back to biology. Like the childbirth, the high rates of childbirth death. We don't want that.
Right. Oh, thank you. I really appreciated that. I loved your response. And I obviously didn't know, people don't know, but I don't know my guest responses before they come on the show. So I was like just listening and waiting to hear what you said. And I really thought that was such a compassionate answer that really goes back to the evidence, which is what I want to do on my platforms too. And that's why I'm happy you're here, but also understands people. Like understands the patient and family dynamic in front of us, and how can we better communicate from a place of compassion and not fear. And that is what we're doing here. So thank you. Oh,
Love it.
love it.
Love it.
Well,
Love it. Love it. Love it.
I do have one more question before we go. Of course, there's some marketing gimmicks out there. How, just in a general piece, how can a parent know what's safe? Like, you talked about whether it's approved. Is there certain labels that should be on devices and products? Because so many things are there, like wedges for mattresses, and this thing, and it's like boggles my mind how a lot of these things are still on the market. So, what would you be your
Yes.
advice for parents who are purchasing things for their cribs or
Right.
sleep?
So I talk about this a lot in No Panic Parenting because like it's hard for parents to know. It can be very difficult, and you can't listen to the marketing messages. You'll be led astray. So, but to try to boil down a little bit of what I say a lot more in depth there. For instance, there's the JPMA, the Juvenile Product
Mm-hmm.
Manufacturing Association. Big ticket items, car seats, cribs, high chairs, baby gates, all of those have JPMA certifications. They have CPSC regulations that they have to meet. And there's still bad ones that flood the market, of course. But what I say, if you want to buy those, go to the JPMA website. I have it in my course. I'm happy to share the link with you, Mona, to put in your show notes of the JPMA. And you can go there and you can say, okay, I'm looking at cribs. And they have a big drop down. You can click on cribs, and then you will see the brands that file to the JPMA for
Ah,
certification.
nice.
So you can say, okay, it doesn't say like buy this one crib, but it says, oh, okay, these 4 brands follow up with the JPMA. So these brands are going to be safer. So now you can choose from those brands for all these different items. And then I said, once you go to buy them, 3 places to buy them. Because remember, Mona, there are fake products on the market all the time. There's, Duna car seats. Have been flooded by fake Duna car seats on the
Yeah, it's
market.
so
I
stressful
say
for
this,
parents.
Duna says it themselves that
Yeah,
they're fake Duna car seats. They're labeled as Duna, and they fail in all the car seat testing. So when you go to buy these big ticket items that really matter for safety, 3 places: either buy it directly from the manufacturer, buy from the brand themselves, buy them from, and number 2 is to buy them from a big box store. Target, Walmart, Buy Baby, some store that has a big reputation that that they didn't just go buy them off of Joe's back of his truck for a deal. And then thirdly, if you do buy it from a third party like an Amazon or something, make sure you're going to that brand's storefront on Amazon. And again, not Joe's Baby conglomerate
yeah.
on Amazon, but from the Kleck brand, the Duna brand store, like that, to make sure you're going to get
Very,
what you need.
very helpful because you don't want to go on Etsy randomly, please. Like I went on Etsy and it was like all these crib bumpers and like
Oh,
cushions. And I'm like, because there's no regulation there, right? I mean, people are
no,
able to put stuff online. So this is super helpful. And I will obviously be linking the No Panic Parenting, but I will do a separate link for the JPMA certification because I do think it's important, free information out there too. But
totally
what would
free.
be, I mean, we went through so much today and I really appreciate you going through the evidence and also just practical ways for us to, reduce this risk for SIDS. What would be your final uplifting message for everyone listening? And this is a question I ask all of my guests as a take home as they approach this parenting journey. We had this heavy conversation about SIDS. We did laugh a little bit because I love you and that's what we do. But what would be your final uplifting message for all of our listeners tuning in today?
Okay, I think I would say to all of them, especially the new parents to be, you are going to have that moment. The baby gets put in your arms, and you think, oh my goodness, I'm going to break this thing. I'm going to break a baby. I remember being an intern in residency. It was my first week, Mona, and I go into the first room, and it's a 4-day-old. And my attending professor, I'm talking to the mom, there comes a point I need to pick up this baby. And I start to kind of pick him up, like I approach him like he's a onesie, like I'm going to pick him up by his shoulders. And my attendant is who's behind the mother. And I guess if somebody's watching this in video, they can see he's behind the mother and he looks at me with big eyes. He goes, whoop, a hand like under the butt, gesturing to me, put a hand under the knife. Suddenly I come back to my senses. I remember what to do. I put a hand on the baby's butt. I lift him up. We're fine. As we walked out of the room, my attending very kindly said, great job. And don't worry, when they're born, they pop out with a manual. I was like, so gee, thanks. We all have those moments.
Yeah.
So, and every parent is going to develop their parent gut, their mommy gut, their dad gut, and you listen to that. And that will guide you so often. And then find people that you trust. Myself, Mona, Dr. Mona, trustworthy person. So you have your mommy gut and you supplant it with those experts around you that you can trust. And then there's lots of other noise. Try to block that out and always kind of find those things that you trust and you'll do great. Your baby's going to be great and they're lucky to have you as a parent.
I love it. Oh, Darria, thank you. Where can everyone go to stay connected, find out more about No Panic Parenting? Give us all that details right now.
Yes. So Instagram, you mentioned I'm at Dr. Darria. That's where I'm most active. I'm on other platforms too, but that's where I'm the very most active. It's TikTok at The Real Dr. Darria because I can't figure out my handle there. And long story. And then of course, No Panic Parenting is just nopanicparenting.com. And would love to see people there. Reach out to me in any way and love to help parents keep their babies safer and give themselves some sanity as well.
Thank you, Dr. Darria, for joining me. This was awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Mona. Have a great day.
Thank you. And for everyone tuning in, please make sure to leave a comment if you found this helpful. Please, this is how we can grow this YouTube channel and make sure that everyone keeps coming here for more conversations that I have with these guests. And I cannot wait to chat with another guest next time.
Thank you. Oh, I would also say, don't forget, there is a coupon code for Dr. Mona PedsDocTalk listeners. We'll put that in the show notes.
We will. We'll put it in the show notes and comments on YouTube so that you can check that out if you don't win the giveaway, because we are going to have hopefully a giveaway in our social media post. But if you don't win that, you can at least get this amazing resource. So thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in. If you love this conversation, make sure to hit that thumbs up sign, share this episode on your social media channels, and subscribe to this channel to stay up to date on all future episodes and our weekly educational videos. Have questions or comments? Make sure to comment below, and I'll see you all next time. Stay well, stay loved, and keep on shining.